Hello and welcome to the start of this new two-part series where we're going to be taking a look at all of the games that have been made by one of my favourite game developers of all time, Playdead. So far they've actually only made 2 games, but they currently have a third one in development, which of course I'm super excited for. But before we get ahead of ourselves, I think we should first tackle their debut game, which was of course Limbo, which was originally released on the Xbox 360 all the way back in 2010, making this game 12 years old. That just doesn't seem right. Despite Limbo releasing originally as an Xbox 360 exclusive, it has since released on almost every platform imaginable, from the PS3, PC, Vita, Xbox One, mobile devices, PS4, and most recently, even the Switch. Every single one of these ports seem to be rock solid as well, so no matter where you're playing this, you're bound to have a good time. I think one of the reasons that this game resonated with me so much was that it brought back a game subgenre which had almost been completely absent during the 6th generation of consoles. And this subgenre happens to be one of my favourites, with it being a cinematic platformer. These are typically 2D side-scrollers, but that have more of an emphasis on realism than something like Super Mario Bros. Would have. The characters in these games mostly can only do things that a normal human would be able to do, so there's no double jumping or anything like that. But because of this, they're extremely vulnerable to things which any other video game character would make light work of. Things like fall damage, being hit by rocks, or of course being attacked by enemies will end in your brutal death. And this often makes this type of game come under scrutiny for being based around trial and error. However, they normally work around this by having infinite lives and continues, as well as reasonable checkpoint systems. Classic examples of this type of game include the 1989 Prince of Persia, Flashback, Another World, Heart of Darkness, and of course, probably the most famous example being Oddworld Abe's Odyssey, one of my favourite games of all time. Not only did Limbo spark more interest in this forgotten subgenre though, but it was also one of the OG, hugely successful indie games. It's difficult to imagine a time when indie games were pretty uncommon, but back in the early Xbox 360 days, this was definitely the case. It wasn't until the Xbox Live Arcade appeared on the console that it gave indie titles a proper marketplace and enabled them to become truly viable. I would personally say that the Xbox Live Arcade properly took off in 2008 with Braid, Bionic Commando Rearmed and Castle Crashers. And it remained the best place to be for indie titles until around 2011, which is when PlayStation started supporting indie developers a bit more too. But for a time there, we had banger after banger of indie games on the Xbox Live Arcade, from Super Meat Boy, Splosion Man, Trials HD, Shadow Complex, Spelunky, The Dishwasher, Fancy Pants Adventures, Fez, and way more on top of these. This was probably one of the main contributing factors that made me actually prefer the Xbox 360 to the PS3 for a while, which is actually a pretty huge accomplishment considering that I've used the PlayStation systems as my primary consoles for my entire life, apart from the Xbox 360 era. All of this is to say that Limbo was a pretty huge deal, being one of the original darling indie games and pretty much single-handedly revitalising an entire subgenre is nothing to scoff at, but after 12 years, does the game still have the impact that it once had? One of the greatest things about Limbo is definitely its unapologetic focus on being minimal. There's the obvious stuff like the fact it's completely black and white, giving it a striking visual style. There's the fact it only uses 2 face buttons in order to jump and grab, and then uses the analog stick to move. There's the fact it doesn't even feature a clear-cut narrative, having no dialogue and telling a story through symbolism and imagery alone. And even the product description on digital storefronts is as vague as possible, simply stating, uncertain of his sister's fate, a boy enters limbo. And as far as I'm aware, this one sentence is the only information that the developers have ever given anyone about the plot of the game. This focus on minimalism in every single aspect of the game, from its presentation, story, controls, and even its music, is a piece of absolute genius. You can tell that this is a game that was developed with a crystal clear vision, and it was executed exactly according to this vision. This is something which was clearly only possible without a big publisher interfering, which makes it all the more important that this project was an indie title. The result for the player is something that just feels almost perfect. Everything clicks together and there's no fat that needs to be trimmed because everything in the game is designed around you only having a minimal amount of interactivity with the environment. Plus, it's also quite short, easily being completable in a couple of hours, significantly less if you've played it before and know what you're doing. This is all well and good, and I can gush about how much of an impact this game had on me and the game industry, as well as its impressive dedication to its core vision, all I want. But, at the end of the day, is the core gameplay actually any good? Even though you can only move left and right, jumping and grabbing things as you go, I was surprised by just how much variety this game had to offer. Each new area of the game either introduces a new gimmick or expands on a previous one in an unexpected way, and this keeps Limbo feeling really fresh for the entire time that you're playing it. The start of the game gets you familiar with the basic concepts of jumping and grabbing things to solve basic physics puzzles, all without the need for tutorial pop-ups, which would have gone against the theme of minimalism, which is so important here. After a while though, things take a more sinister turn and you find yourself coming face to face with giant spiders and mobs of angry kids who seemingly want to kill you and have been setting traps everywhere. This is where the game has this nice balance of gameplay styles. You have these cinematic moments like here where the spider traps you in a web and you helplessly watch as it ties you up and saves you as a snack for later. You have the more traditional platforming sections like this bit where you're jumping across trees as they start falling down. And then these more quiet puzzle sections like this bit where you need to knock a branch of a tree down into some water to make it across a small river. Because everything flows into each other, it can be difficult to appreciate just how much is going on here and how much variety this game actually has. And even after playing this God knows how many times, I still find it fresh going back to it every now and then. Of course, things slowly progress over the course of the game and it introduces not only brand new environments from caves, urban city areas and factories, but with each of these new visually distinct areas also comes new gameplay elements too. I think this is important with any game, but with Limbo, this had to be at the forefront of the experience even more, because there could have been a real problem with all of these areas looking stagnant due to the whole game being black and white. But the amazing visual design combined with the changes in gameplay make each new section feel completely fresh. So the first major new gameplay element is found with these brain worms, which attach onto the boy's head and make him unable to stop moving in a particular direction. So you'll need to move things around to make a safe path before they attach themselves onto you. But then there's also the threat of rising water in these sections too, with platforming heavy sequences where you need to rush to move faster than the water, but also puzzles where you need to manipulate the depth of water to make it across gaps. Then, as the area reaches its climax, the game throws rising water and brainworms at you combined, and it's just absolute game design perfection. They don't overuse any particular gimmick, but use them enough so that they feel fully developed, and then combine them with previous gimmicks you've encountered before to test your knowledge of everything you've learned, and then throw something brand new at you in the next section. By the end of the game, you'll be thinking that you've seen it all. You've been through the rising water, brainworms, more physics-based puzzle areas, sections where the entire world starts rotating and you need to avoid obstacles and make jumps using a limited light source. And then the game still has things left and introduces zero-gravity sections where you need to manipulate machines to walk on the ceiling and move boxes to make it onto ledges. I mean, later in the game there's even machine gun turrets which you need to either avoid or manipulate to get past puzzles too. And it all culminates in a section which combines the timing heavy sequences from earlier in the game with the zero gravity. All of this is packed into a game which, like I say, is only 2 hours long. It's unbelievably impressive. There's even this one tiny section which I swear is a direct reference to the Oddworld games. You come across this little cute creature, and upon approaching it, it runs away into a little tunnel that you can't access. So you need to bait it out with food, get on the other side of it, and then make it run in the opposite direction in order to solve a puzzle. But isn't this literally the exact same way that a paramite works? There's moments in Abe's Odyssey in particular where you need to do this exact same thing, having a paramite backed up against a wall and needing to feed it to get on the other side of it and make it run off in the other direction. This has got to be a reference, right? I mean, the little creature in Limbo even somewhat vaguely resembles a paramite, or maybe more closely a slug, but still. Now though, there is one particular element with this game that I know divides quite a lot of people, some appreciating it, while others think that it's a little bit cheap and maybe even a bit immersion breaking too. So, let's talk about death. The world of Limbo is desperate to kill you, and the odds are that you're gonna die a lot throughout this game. Sometimes your death will be due to you messing up some platforming or missing something obvious with a certain puzzle. But there are times where it might feel a little bit unfair and like the game is killing you almost for the sake of it. The primary example that people use when talking about this is this section here where you come up to two big steel plates hanging above pressure pads. The first one kills you if you step on the areas next to the middle platform, whereas the second one kills you if you step on the middle platform itself. This is a little bit annoying because there's no way you'll get past this unless you get seriously lucky. But honestly, I don't really mind it too much. In order for the game to have such an oppressive atmosphere, you need to know that almost everything in it is gonna kill you. But if you're skilled enough to get through it without dying on your first attempt, I feel like some of the experience would be missing. So some of these sort of red herring sections are maybe a little bit necessary for the game to achieve what it's trying to do. Plus, it's difficult to be too mad at the game, considering that its checkpoints are extremely frequent and forgiving, and there's basically no load times either, enabling you to instantly restart and try again. While I can forgive this, I do understand that this is frustrating for a lot of people, and it isn't helped by the fact that one of the game's trophies, or achievements, is unlocked by finishing the whole game dying 5 times or less, which by the way, I've done. So it's almost like this optional objective goes against one of the core values of the game, and it's the only single thing that strays a little bit from the overall vision. But like I say, this objective is optional, and if you don't care about trophies or achievements, you might not ever even know that this is an objective anyway. It does give the game some replay value though, because you'll probably need to play it quite a bit to do the whole thing basically without dying. Speaking of replay value, another thing I've not talked about are the collectibles hidden in the game. There's 10 of these hidden eggs to find in optional side areas, and by manipulating things in clever ways to uncover them. Interestingly, in the original Xbox 360 version of Limbo, collecting these eggs didn't actually do anything besides give you an achievement for each one, making them feel a little bit redundant. However, in all of the future releases, there was a new secret area added into the game, which could only be unlocked by collecting all 10 eggs, which lights up 10 candles on the floor and opens a door to the right of this area. Maybe these candles imply that the boy is 10 years old, but that's kind of irrelevant to the overall experience, I suppose. This secret area is interesting because not only is it by far the hardest part of the entire game, but most of it is in complete darkness, having you navigate past moving buzzsaws and other things by using audio cues only. It's really cool and feels like an idea the developers had but didn't want to put in the base game due to its difficulty, so instead they put it in there as a bonus section as a weird sort of DLC. Another interesting detail is that this secret level is still inaccessible in the Xbox 360 version of the game, making that version technically inferior to any of the others. You don't actually get anything besides a trophy or achievement for completing this secret area, but I feel like the secret level is reward enough for basically getting 100% in the game. It might have been considered a little bit too video gamey to have unlocked a hat for the boy or something like that, and for there to be something more significant like a secret ending might have tainted the original vision for the game's story. Maybe we could have had a scene showing what happened to the weird paramite creature though, because we just leave it running around in a wheel and never see it again, which is kinda sad. Before we wrap things up here, I do want to mention one final thing with this game that I think is absolutely phenomenal, and that is the sound design. I mean, what is there to say here? The sound design is practically flawless. There's moments of quiet uneasiness where there's nothing but the wind, footsteps, and this low static noise which reflects the film-like grain filter over the game. There's more intense moments where the ambient music starts droning and increasing in volume, making it take on a more threatening presence. There's even moments of what I would say is almost peacefulness, with rain in the background and the music being more calming. But this is cut through by the sharpness of neon signs flickering on and off, making them sound much more dangerous than they otherwise would. Then there's sections where the world suddenly starts becoming more abstract, rotating on itself and featuring impossible geometry, where the game sounds like it's straight out of Silent Hill. There's a huge amount of attention to detail featured here, with your footsteps making different sounds depending on the surface you're walking on, different reverb effects depending on your environment, and background noise you would only normally hear if you stand still and really take it in. If you do this, you'll be able to hear things like dripping water and rats scuttling around. It's amazing and makes the world of Limbo feel so immersive and expressive. When I revisited Limbo to make this video, I was honestly thinking that I would come away from it having not enjoyed it as much as I once did. With all of the new indie games and just games in general having come out after this game's release, I was thinking that by comparison, maybe it wouldn't look as good, or maybe it wouldn't play as well as some of the new games. Fortunately though, I was completely wrong, and it turns out that Limbo holds up tremendously well. There's hardly anything to say here that's negative outside of it not really having a true completion reward after finishing the secret level, and that maybe being given the objective of finishing the game dying 5 times or less is a little bit counterintuitive to the game itself. Clearly it wants you to die quite a lot, so having this objective kind of doesn't really work. There's also the common complaint of certain moments in the game being based around trial and error rather than purely skill and logic. But to be honest, these moments are few and far between, and I don't even think that it's entirely a bad thing that they exist to begin with. Another little thing that I love about the game is how expressive the boy's animation is, which is an important detail considering that we need to care about him and feel a desire to get him through his journey alive. And with him basically just being a shadow, this could have been difficult. But with little details like his cute and childlike swinging animation and how he sometimes stumbles around, he feels like quite an endearing character, even without any dialogue or conventional story elements. But that wraps up my thoughts on Limbo. Even all of these years later, I still think that this is an amazing game, and at this point I would even go as far as to say that it's a must play. I mean, it's available literally everywhere, and it's ridiculously cheap too, so you don't really have an excuse. The physical PC version that I have also comes with these stupid retro 3D glasses, which is a bit of a gimmick, but it does give you another way of playing the game if you've already experienced it normally a million times before. You might have noticed that I've not gone into too much detail about the story in this game, and the reason for that is that I'm considering doing an entire video devoted to all of the different theories about the 2 Playdead games, so let me know if you'd be interested in watching that. For now though, I think it's about time that we wrap this thing up. So, join me next time where we're going to be taking a look at Playdead's second game, which was of course Inside, and the big question here is, with Limbo setting such a high bar of quality, will Inside manage to get anywhere near that? You'll have to wait and find out. In the meantime though, if you enjoyed this video, give it a like, subscribe to see more stuff like this coming soon, and I'll see you next time. Bye!